Hello, hello, everyone. How are you doing today? It is so great to see everybody. Welcome to this edition of Ask the Experts. So, if you don't know what Ask the Experts is, when we were brainstorming about live content, the live content really supported a lot of people in our community over the pandemic. People were struggling, a lot of us were isolated. The IOCDF decided to come out with live programming. So, weekly streams just to give people a chance to communicate with each other, to build community, answer questions, etc. But Liz McAville and I are both licensed therapists. She's in Texas, I'm in California. And what we really wanted to offer is we both have OCD. We've lived OCD. We're in recovery. We manage it. We're doing really well in our lives. And then we became clinicians and we trained, really studied how to treat OCD. We've both gone through intensive training just to be able to come on here every first and third Wednesday of the month at 9 a.m. on my time. I think it's 11 a.m. her time. For the IOCDF, it's 12 noon. And just answer your questions, give you some direction, give you some answers. Obviously, we're not your therapist. We can't answer your questions like so specific. You're going to have to see a clinician for that. But at least it gives us an opportunity to answer some questions, direct you in the right place, where to go, give you information, give you resources, and to build community. So I always remind everybody this live stream is yours, meaning ask questions, make comments, interact with each other in the chat. It's a really robust chat. It gives people an opportunity to meet others with OCD. We always want to know where you're from. So while you're watching this, just type in the chat, where are you from? Where are you watching us from? Let us know who you're here to support. Are you here for yourself? Do you have OCD? Are you here for a loved one? Are you a clinician wanting to learn more about OCD? Anything that we can do to answer your questions, please, please, please put those in the chat. But Ask the Experts is your show. It's an opportunity to ask questions. Like I said, we'll be giving you resources in the chat and just be able to give you some direction on OCD and just to kind of give people an idea of where they can go to get proper treatment, what they should be expecting, and answering specific questions. So even though this is educational and you're going to get a lot of resources, it's not intended to replace therapy. So if you do want to find a therapist who can specifically work with you and treat you one-on-one, make sure to go to the IOCDF's online resource directory. So that's actually where I found my therapist before I went to treatment. And that's at iocdf.org/find-help. So make sure you head over there. That's where I found my therapist many years ago. They were trained in OCD. Shout out to Karen Pickett. And that's why I'm doing so well this day. So head over there. We also want to make sure that this isn't a crisis hotline. So if you're really, really struggling, you think you might be a harm to yourself or others, or you're in a crisis, please, if you go to either your local emergency room, call 911. You can also go to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, either by dialing 988, or you can go online at 988lifeline.org. And then remember, we're a community. Let's be respectful to each other. Let's support each other. Make sure that we got each other's back. And this is broadcast on several social media platforms. So be kind and just remember that when asking questions. So it's good to see everybody. A little bit about myself. My name is Chris Tronson. So I'm a therapist licensed in California. I work at a treatment center here in Orange County. I'm also vice president of OCD Southern California. We're an official affiliate of the International OCD Foundation. I'm one of the lead advocates for the IOCDF, and I'm also a board member on the board of directors for the IOCDF. I lead some of their special interest groups, including the Trauma and OCD Special Interest Group, also the Body Dysmorphic Disorder Special Group, LGBTQ, and the Young Adult Special Interest Group. So just really kind of involved in the OCD community, and I try to give as much resource as I can in these chats. So far, I've seen a couple people pop in. OCD Crusher on YouTube, thank you so much for your kind words. Underarm Charm on YouTube also says hi and says welcome to everybody. So it's hi, good to see you. Grace from Michigan, it's always really good to see you. We have Leonore from Holland. That's awesome, supporting their husbands. That's amazing that we have people internationally as well. We have we have a couple other people saying hi in the chat. So welcome everybody. Nikki from Dublin, Ireland. So thank you so much. So it's good to see everyone. So remember, pop those questions. We got Kat Koss from Canada out there on YouTube. Make sure to ask those questions in the chat. We do have some pre-submitted questions. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is start to answer those. And as the live questions pop in the chat, I'll make sure to answer those. So I will start off with a pre-submitted question. So the question is, when does it make sense to have the family involved in our son's sessions? We do not feel as he is being completely honest with his therapist, and we want to let her know what exactly is going on. Also, would it be good to have an entire family go to one of his sessions? So that's a really good question. What about family involvement, right? So we always want the person with OCD to be the main one who is doing the work. But this is such a family disorder, especially if your loved one lives with you. So what that means is there might be accommodation, there might be answering questions, there might be avoidances happening in the household. And the other thing is, unfortunately, sometimes either the person with OCD isn't being fully honest with a clinician, or sometimes we're so wrapped up in our world, we don't recognize certain things are OCD and we kind of just go with something. And so that's the problem is we may not even know some of the stuff we're doing OCD. I remember for me, when I used to shampoo my hair, even after treatment, I used to use globs as shampoo because I didn't know better. Nobody ever taught me how much to use. And it wasn't until I went to a hairstylist and she showed me how much to use that I didn't know that. So sometimes it's not that we're not being honest. We just simply don't even recognize that something is OCD. So what would be good for that is seeing if your loved one would be open. We sometimes the loved one is afraid that the person's just going to dump on them or not say anything positive or take over the session. So maybe have a conversation with you and your loved one a little bit before that session. What do you expect in that session? What are they okay with? What would that dynamic look like? And so let's say you come up with it that, okay, you're going to come into the first 20 minutes of the session and make sure you go in there and bring up some of the positives as well. We with OCD don't want to just hear from everyone around us how terrible we're doing, right? Or what we haven't accomplished yet. So if you can talk to the therapist and just say, look, here's the things that Chris is doing really great. Here's the things I'm a little bit worried about and I don't see them being worked on. Is that something you're aware of? My mom did that during my treatment. We did have a family session with everybody I lived with to make sure that they weren't accommodating. So hopefully your loved one is open to that. Sometimes if your loved one isn't, another idea would be sending off, they make sure to send off an email maybe to the clinician if your loved one is okay with that. So maybe not going to the session, but asking questions in an email. So there's a couple other ways besides an in-person meeting, but I do think an in-person meeting is always helpful. So that would be good if they're open to it. So, all right. The second question is I lost a family heirloom and can't stop obsessing over it. I know I'll never find it. Help. How do I accept that it's gone and I'll never know where it is? So, what we want to first do is I always talk to my clients about this is there's a difference between the O, kind of have to do it like this, the O and the C in OCD. The D's over here, but D just stands for disordered, meaning that it impacts your life negatively. So, what is happening is you're not really obsessing, you're doing mental compulsions. Most likely you're checking in your head trying to remember where it went, or you're ruminating, or you're fantasizing about what it would be like to find the heirloom again, or you might be just mentally kind of beating yourself up, right? So I always tell clients like the O is the original question that OCD kind of presents, or the original theme or the original content. So OCD is telling you each day, you lost a family heirloom, you'll never find it, this is terrible, that your family's going to be mad, etc. Once it drops off that O, right, whatever we do to that, that's the C, and that's our compulsion. So if you are at the grocery store and the whole entire time you're at the grocery store, you're thinking about the heirloom. Where did it go? Why did I lose it? Will I ever find it? I'm so mad. I can't live without it, etc. If you're watching a movie and you're kind of tuning the movie out and you're answering those questions, that's a compulsion. And so the good news is that's something that you do have control over. So I like people to almost externalize the internal OCD voice, right? So if that person was sitting on the couch or going grocery shopping with you, you can't tell them to shut up. Unfortunately, you tell OCD to shut up, it just gets louder. So it's tolerating the fact that OCD is going to be following you around, talking to you about the heirloom, whether it's the grocery store, whether it's getting ready for bed, whether it's in the shower, and your power is not responding. That's the compulsion that you can choose not to engage with. So what I say acceptance is sometimes just tolerating facts. So it sounds like will never find it. I don't know the situation. Maybe you've looked and it's done. It might be 5-10 years gone, right? So what tolerating the facts would be is like this heirloom is gone. It was part of my life, it was part of my family's life for a very long time. It meant a lot, and there's nothing that I could do about it at this point. I have to kind of pick up my bags and figuratively move on, right? Anytime the OCD comes to me and reminds me that the heirloom is lost, I'm going to agree with it. I'm going to say, you're right, it is lost. I mean, you're making a fact, not happy about it. I don't have to be happy about it, but the part of my brain that I've been entertaining, that I may find it, or I'm having these conversations eternally, that's the choice I'm not going to make. In the beginning, it's going to be very tough and very annoying to just not respond to that OCD voice that's yelling at you. But your power is to literally just say, like, I don't have to be the second voice in this conversation. I can't tune OCD out, per se. But if I'm focusing outward and engaging in life, it's going to be background noise and eventually it will fade. So definitely make sure that you are not engaging in that conversation. That's where your power is, the C. Grace asked a question at 9:06 a.m. my time, 12:06 Eastern. Does the IOCF website have information on past and present research studies? I'd love to read more about OCD related research. I know that the in-person conference has a lot of good presentations, and you want to read about it. So as a clinician, one thing that I have access to, luckily as a alumni from my association, is I have different accesses to journal articles. And so the journal articles that I have access to, I think it's from PsycInfo. It's a EBSCOhost journal article database. I do know, I looked up online because a client had a question about research. It's about $150 a year, and you can access pretty much any psychology research. So a lot of the research that's done in our field would be in that database. The second thing is that there's a lot of OCD research that's made public through the government. So what you can do is, instead of just going to traditional Google, you can type in Google Scholar, and then you can type in OCD research. Now, some of the research is going to be, you're going to need to pay, but some of it's free because it's government based. The newsletter that comes out quarterly, whether you get it in person or virtual, I know a lot of the IOCDF research is published in that. So I don't think it's necessarily just on the website, but now that it's free to be a community member for the IOCDF, you can access any of the newsletters free. So if you go to the newsletter and you look at them, I know there's a lot of research published in those. There's two good published research on OCD and like cannabis usage. And so I've had clients kind of access and read through the database. I'll have Fran put up, if there is a place on the actual website outside of the newsletters, I'll have him put that in the chat. But definitely, I access the newsletters all the time. I have the physical copy, so I'll usually show a client in session, but I like to keep the originals. So I give them the link now that it's free and accessible for being a member. And you can go in and find some great research. So hopefully that helps. Underarm Charm, so that's at 12:08 your time, Fran, says, I struggle with building routine. What are some ways I can break that cycle of all or nothing? I have to be 100% of my routine or not at all. Totally relate to this. So I had a very complex morning routine and night routine, and I couldn't just do some of the night routine or some of the morning routine. And I remember, I mean, this is so sad to say out loud, but I was a pallbearer for my great grandma's funeral, and I had to do my whole morning routine. And I had magical thinking, and magical thinking said I couldn't wake up before 9:45 a.m. or my mom would die. It makes no sense, I know, but that felt real. And I needed to leave pretty shortly after that to be on time, but I had to do my whole morning routine, which was laborious, and I ended up showing up to the funeral extremely late. So the thing is, OCD wants that all or nothing. I think of the part of the brain that deals with OCD, that fight or flight, that part of the brain absolutely can't think of like complex, like multiple kind of scenarios, right? It could deal with either yes or no, 100% or 0%. So that's the problem. I'll have clients that have contamination and haven't showered in months. And it's not that they want to be dirty. If anything, they want to be clean. But the problem is they can't, the shower is so exhaustive that they just avoid the shower. And then when it's time to shower, they do the whole routine and it might be hours. So what we want to look to do is to break that up, to create a more kind of flexible routine. So the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to recognize, like, yes, if I decide to kind of break this all or nothing, I will feel fear. I'll feel anxiety. I'll feel distress. My brain will kind of yell at me and tell me that I'm wrong. But here's the thing, that's OCD's only power. It can yell at you in your head and it can make you feel a little bit crummy temporarily, but it can't change behavior. We can. So what I would suggest for you is to say, okay, if I write out my whole routine, and it could be anything, it doesn't have to be morning routine, like getting ready. It could be a cleaning routine, a workout routine. I'll have clients that their workout routine's an hour and 15, but if they only have an hour, they will just skip it all together. Even though obviously they know an hour of exercise is better than none, right? So what we want to do is in that case is say, okay, I'll just use it. Let's say it's a morning routine to get ready. What you would do is you'd kind of list out your morning routine and write if there like a mini hierarchy. Is there anything on that list that would be easier to sort of drop? And kind of rank it from easiest to hardest. And then what you'd want to do is you want to practice that routine and really kind of drop something. So let's say you're getting ready and you look at that list and you're like, okay, putting on chapstick would be the easiest thing to sort of drop. You would get ready that morning. You wouldn't put on the chapstick. That's kind of like the opposite action, right? Now, OCD is going to throw a little fit in your head, and it is your job to not get into an argument with it, not try to appease it. Just really kind of let it throw its fit, but continue to focus on what you need to do. Don't reverse anything. That's the response prevention, and make that consistent. And after a while, you'll notice that you have a lot more flexible with chapstick. Maybe you do it later on in the day, or maybe you don't do it at all. And then you kind of start making those changes and gradually get to a point where you notice that you kind of move past the fear and you kind of learn that you can be more flexible with your routine. Lastly, what I always like people to do is see value in their exposure. So I'll tell people, like, you want to kind of create a 5 minute, oh no, I just woke up, my alarm didn't go off routine. I need to just get in the bathroom, do the bare minimum and get out. So all of us have that. I have that, So if I were to oversleep, I'm going to throw on some deodorant. I'm going to take a baby wipe to the sensitive areas. I have these like face wipes that would clean off my face. I'd brush my teeth probably. That's the one thing that I hate not doing. And I'd be out the door. So kind of having that flexible and see purpose in it would help. Hello, Delizas from YouTube. Liz might come on. She's in an airport going off to Thanksgiving, so she might come off. And then Fran at 1209 put up for the IOCDF. If Liz doesn't come on, like I said, she's traveling. She said she might pop on in the airport. If she isn't, we are back though. We'll be back next week. So we'll see you next week for sure. And she'll be there next Wednesday. Okay, cool. So Grace at 1209, Fran put up a place of grant research and stuff like that. So that'll be super cool. And also you can email them a place as well. So really, really awesome. So you can check it out. I'm going to go back to a pre-submitted question. My husband has OCD, and I feel as if I do not know what he does in therapy. I do not know if he is even doing exposures. He keeps it secretive, but I also want to support his privacy. That's a really tough situation to be in when you are a loved one and you feel like maybe your loved one isn't quite doing the work that they need to do. I kind of answered a family question earlier. There's a different dynamics with partners, right? They're a grown up, they want their privacy, etc. What I would say is us with OCD, know if somebody asking us a question from kind of like the motive of like caring about us. Like we know when someone asks us like, hey, how's your therapy going? I want you to get better. I want to know how it's going. I want to be there for you. I want to be a listening ear. I can't give you reassurance. I can't listen to you confess, but I can support you as the person. We know when somebody's coming to us with that kind of question, right? Versus like, are you getting better yet? What are you doing? Are you ever going to get better? I'm tired of paying for, so we know the difference. So what I would suggest for this question is go to your husband and really come from a place of compassion, a place of interest, a place of support, and just say like, hey, this is a big part of our lives, especially a big part of your life. And I feel a little bit in the dark here. And I've researched enough and I've gone to these things and learned enough that I'm starting to get an idea of what it is that individuals with OCD should be doing to get better. And I just want to know what you're doing. I just want to be here to support. I want to celebrate your successes. I want us to have a chart on the fridge so I know what you're doing. Are you open to giving that? One thing I tell my clients a lot is tell your loved ones what you're doing. You don't always have to tell the content. So in this case, maybe your husband has intrusive thoughts about harming your children or obsesses over if you're the right person for him and ruminates that, did he make a mistake marrying you? I mean, things like that. And he may feel the content would hurt you. And so it's one of those things where I definitely can understand maybe why he isn't opening up about content, but he doesn't have to, right? He can just open up about what he's doing and how he's trying to make a difference and get better. So have that conversation, maybe in front of the therapist or alone, and just let him know that it's coming from a place of interest and caring, because that will really be the difference. All right, so delete us at 13. Delete us at 13 at YouTube at 12:15 East Coast says, "Do you have any advice balancing school stress with OCD? And when your OCD might have rigid rules and shame when you don't stay within those rules." So here's the thing: all of us with individuals with OCD are absolutely strict with our rules. And sometimes rules can help us. Like there's certain rules on how to cook food. There's certain rules when driving that we all follow. So rules sometimes have a place, but us with OCD will create so many rules and they're not helpful. So that's usually the first question I'll ask clients is this helpful? Is this rule helpful? Is it enhancing your life? Is it furthering you? Is it making sure that your values and your goals are being met? Or is this a strict rule that OCD is placed on you that has no value and instead is just going to make you miserable? Are you allowing any flexibility in the rules? So, for instance, there's even flexibility in our driving laws, right? Like if something fell in the middle of the street and you have to go around on the other side to get around it, technically you're crossing double lines, you're driving on the wrong side of the road, but there is no other option. You can't just sit there for hours, right? So sometimes rules can be bent, we can be flexible. So what you want to make sure is that your rules are flexible. So it is a good idea to obviously have school work and be getting your work done and having that, and balancing like OCD treatment and fighting the OCD. I would never have giving into OCD as part of your rules. I would have a structured plan of how to cut those rules out, right? Or cut the OCD out. But be flexible. If it's a week where you're really swamped with school, you focus a little bit more on that. And for your OCD treatment, what you might do instead is just kind of keep afloat. Do exposures that come up naturally, but maybe don't set aside time. Now, if OCD has some rigid rules for you and it's interfering with school and then you're feeling guilty because you're not giving into the OCD, remind yourself that that's not real guilt. When we don't do something that OCD asks of us, that's not real guilt. That's not real shame. That's artificial that the OCD is projecting on us to make us feel bad to do the compulsions. So never allow yourself to hold on to that guilt. Give it back to the OCD and say, thank you, but that's not mine to have, right? And really work on reducing those rules. And you may not feel great when you reduce the rules that OCD asks of you, but remind yourself that school and your education is much more important than anything OCD says. The next question is from Mary Beth at 12:15. It says the app or the website NoCD sends therapists available this week. Are they really available on that short notice? Unfortunately, Mary Beth, I don't work for NoCD, so I don't know exactly what you're talking about. I do know that you can go on like your state and it says therapists available this week. I don't know if that means like it's a first come, first serve. I'm not really sure how they work. We sometimes do have either Patrick McGrath or Stephen Smith, who are from NoCD on these lives, so they could maybe answer it, or I might reach out to them directly. Unfortunately, like IOCF is a nonprofit, so it's not really, we're not really working for any company. So I can't answer that question, unfortunately. But I definitely would say that if there is like a user question, I would ask them on NoCD. I just don't know the answer. If you ever see Patrick McGrath or Stephen Smith as one of our guests, then I would definitely ask them. So I'm not sure, unfortunately. All right, I'm going to ask another question. I don't know how you did that line through on the back end, Fran, so thank you. So I don't have to delete the question. The next question is, can you talk about where a patient starts? Like, how do we find the right provider with the right training? Really good question. So we just did, Liz, myself, and John, Dr. John Abramowitz, we just did a 2-part live stream on kind of like, where do you start to really answer this question? So the first thing I would say is please, please, please make sure that you go and look at that. That's going to either be in the YouTube, on the YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com/IOCDF, you'll see it was last Wednesday. We did a part 2 with John Abramowitz about like how to find the right care. And then we did a part 1. So my short answer would be, please, please, please go there. You can watch part 1 and part 2. We go literally through like the start to the finish. Like, what kind of therapist should you find? What training should they have? What kind of treatment should they do? And all of that. But to answer that question a little bit, so you don't have to watch the whole live stream. The IOCDF has a really good search engine, iocdf.org/find-help. You'd want to put in your zip code. Now with virtual, you'd want to make that decision. Do you want virtual care? Do you want in-person care? If it's in person, you'd want to find somebody in the area code around you. If it's or zip code. If it's virtual, then you want to find somebody in your state. And then you want to find like maybe 3 to 5 people. Look through the website, make sure that a majority of their clients have OCD or related disorder. 100% of my clients have OCD, body dysmorphic disorder, hoarding, skin picking, hair pulling, the majority OCD, the next highest BDD. So a lot of clinicians are like myself, where we almost only see OCD. They might have been trained through the BTTI, that's a training institute through the IOCDF, or some other well-respected training institute. You want to make sure that they have worked at an OCD center for some time, that they speak at conferences or go to conferences and continue with education, that they primarily use exposure response prevention. They're open to referring you to a psychiatrist if you need medication. So those would be some things that you would want to look for sure. All right, at 12:17, I'll go back to a live question from Richa on Facebook. It says, I've done my master's in psychology from India, and I'm working as a psychotherapist with a lot of OCD sufferers. Is it possible for me to apply for a research grant on a study related to OCD at the IOCDF? Absolutely. So I know the IOCDF, I'm not a researcher myself, so I definitely see the emails. I just don't go deep into them. But the IOCDF does do this a lot. So I know that Fran above put an email that you could go to, which would be, I think it was, I might have to have you put that back up, Frank, because I missed it in the chat. But there's a direct email that you can email at the IOCDF in order to, it's research@iocdf.org. Once again, that's research@iocdf.org. So you can go there and email them any questions, but I do know that they are continuously giving out grants and they ask for people to apply for them. So I would absolutely say that you do it. We need as much OCD and related research. When I did my thesis, all the other students in my class were like, there's so much research, I don't even know what to do. And there was a lot of OCD research, but definitely not as much as others. So we would love that for sure. I'll do another live question. So at 12:17, Lenore B from YouTube says, my husband suffers from contamination OCD. My question is, how can I act when he's having a panic attack? He becomes terrified and also angry with me. How can I help him in that moment? So to answer this question, I think we all as sufferers or individuals with OCD and related disorders have different things that we need. So I used to have a lot of anxiety attacks, actual like panic attacks. I had about 3 when I was struggling. And it's scary. I mean, anxiety attacks are terrible. Those are the ones that we probably, we have more common. But the panic attack where you feel like your heart's going to stop, you can't breathe. I was actually in a car once and I kicked the windshield and cracked it because there wasn't enough air in the car. I thought I was like choking and couldn't breathe. It is terrifying as an individual with going through this. So what we always suggest as clinicians is first have a conversation with your husband, potentially in front of his therapist if he's open. How would you like me to support and help in that moment? Because my guess is that with his clinician, they're working on what he specifically should do in those moments of panic. But you're going to be around him a lot, and you need to know what to do. Some people want the help. They might want you to help them like get outside, get fresh air. I know for me, air conditioning helps. I'd get in my car and blast air because I felt like I couldn't breathe and I was going to like die from lack of oxygen. Sometimes people need to cool their body down. Sometimes movement or exercise helps because the body kind of naturally starts to sweat and calm down. So there's different things he might be doing because of it. And you need to know how to help. Does he want you to be hands off and go in a different room and just leave him, which I know sounds horrible for you, but he may need that space. Does he want you to be there? So I would suggest to ask. So for me, what I wanted is people to like help calm me down, like help me get outside, get some fresh air. My mom used to kind of like rub my back. I needed to kind of go get air. And then once I kind of like leveled out, I needed some space alone to kind of just walk and kind of like, what just happened? What tools did I ignore? What could I do if it comes back? Things like that. So I wish I could give you a sterile answer that would be like across the board, but I promise you asking him what he needs. Now, my guess is if he is angry at you at times, he probably apologizes later. I always remind people that when we're going through this, we're going through like terror. So it's not that we're trying to be mean. We just think we're something bad's going to happen. We're just trying to survive. So, I'm sorry that you're going through that, but ask what you would like. Now, if you end up doing what he wants you to do, and he reacts poorly, then you can have that conversation either in a session or when you've calmed down. Hey, I did what you asked, and you just got like mad at me. So, what would you like me to do? So hopefully that's helpful. All right, I'm going to go to another pre-submitted question. It says, "Do either of you, so Liz or myself, do either of you name your OCD, and is that helpful, or is it better to address the OCD as part of you?" So to answer that question, I would never, ever, ever think of OCD as part of you, and the reason for that is because even if you have skills that may appear like OCD, don't give OCD the credit. So growing up, I was a very perfectionist with school. I cried if I ever got a B. I did the work. I thought about it a lot. Part of my fear was that if I got better, that would dissipate and I'd become very bad at school, very bad at education. However, when the OCD actually kind of was managed, I did way better in school. I was always somebody that was good at education. I like to learn, I like to process information, I like to really put in a lot of work in papers and stuff. So it was never the OCD that gave me that skill. OCD took my skill that's organic to me and then made it complicated and hard, and I did compulsions and overthought and overstudied, etc. And in fact, when OCD was gone, education and concept and learning came to me even quicker. So the OCD is never a part of us. It might take a part of us and make it originally good and kind of overdo it. So an individual that likes to clean and be tidy, but then OCD takes that over, and now that person is spending hours upon hours cleaning. So a lot of people do like to name the OCD, right? They like to name it something and almost think of it as like a person outside of themselves. It comes from a type of therapy known as narrative therapy. So it's been really helpful for a lot of people to kind of conceptualize it as this thing outside of you and naming it. I at least like to change language. So I hear a lot of clients say like, "Oh, my OCD." And I always think about it like nobody says my cancer or like my multiple or no, I'm butchering MS, scoliosis. Like, nobody is like my diabetes. Like people say, "Oh, I have diabetes," right? But for some reason, people own OCD, my OCD. So I like to change language. So if you don't want to name it, if it seems a little childish to you, I always tell my clients like, "How is the OCD doing? What is your experience with OCD like today?" Things like that to kind of keep externalizing it. In my own care, I never named it. I don't think I would have been opposed, but I was really active in sports at the time. I played multiple sports in high school and college. And so the way that we conceptualized OCD is it was sort of the captain. There's this guy, Chris Martin, who I couldn't stand. If he's watching this, I apologize. I can't stand you. As a child, now I don't care. Obviously, this was many years ago, but as a child, he always seemed to play on teams opposed to me in like soccer and other sports. So I imagine that OCD was like him and his team. And each week when I was going home and doing exposures and fighting back against OCD, either I'm going to win or he's going to win. So it helped me just kind of be in that mindset. So I do think something like that helps for sure. The next question is from OCD Crusher on YouTube. It says at 12:18, it says, "I justified some compulsions by saying, I'm doing this so my friend won't be hurt. I feel bad now that I wouldn't do the ERP. Any words of wisdom to keep consistent with ERP and slips?" First of all, I'm so glad that you called it a slip and not a relapse. Always remember, a relapse is where we abandon our tools and pretty much go back to the start. So I always like people to name it a slip because it just means that you didn't do great today, right? And I don't even like judgment like that. So it just wasn't a day that you did your tools. I always remind people too, you can always restart. Let's say you end up having a bad morning, the afternoon can be better, the evening can be better. So one thing that OCD loves to do is it loves to make us it likes to attack the things we care about the most. So in this case, you care a lot about your friend, and the OCD dangles that over your head and says, "Look, dude, like if you don't do this, it means you don't care about your friend." And it makes us feel guilt because it's like, well, I can skip a compulsion or do an exposure if it puts me in danger, but I shouldn't tempt somebody's life like that or their well-being. Remind yourself OCD is lying. That's all it's doing. It's picking something you care about and it's using that to con you into thinking that this is something that you should listen to. So it's picking your friend because it makes you feel responsible. I'm sure you care about that friend. So it's making you feel responsible that if you don't take care of this friend, you're a bad person. Guilt, 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 shame, shame, shame. And then it's tempting to give into the compulsion to make that feeling go away. So OCD can pat you on the back and say, good job, you kept your friend safe. However, your friend was never in danger in the first place, right? OCD is just making it up. It's using thoughts and feelings to con you into feeling a certain way. So you'll do that compulsion. What I always tell people is don't judge yourself. If you slipped up or you gave in, beating yourself up and judging you is going to bring you down. Your mood's going to be low. And with OCD's all or nothing, you're going to kind of have that mindset, well, like, doesn't matter today, then I'm just going to give into compulsions because today's already ruined. Instead, learn from it. How did OCD trick me? What did it say or do to get me to fall in for it? What tools do I have that I didn't use? Okay, OCD most likely will try to re-bring this up again. I'm going to make sure that I don't fall for it the next time. So I'm going to absolutely make sure that when OCD tries to tempt me again with the same obsession, I know what to do now. And it's kind of like a huddle in sports break. Okay, good. I got a plan. So I always tell people if you're beating yourself up, you're not extracting the learning from the situation. And because no learning happened, you're more likely to just repeat it again. But if you really learn and create a plan of what to do next time, you'll be in a better space. Hopefully that helps. Rotom on YouTube at 1221 says, how do I know if my thought is an intrusive thought or a memory of something immoral I did but don't remember? So a lot of times when people have false memory OCD, real event OCD, so these are things from the past, and you'll get like a thought or a memory or a feeling, and then the compulsion is to try to analyze it, trying to figure it out. That is one way that OCD tricks us because it tries to say like, hey, is this like real event that I'm just now remembering? I think because the movies, like we've all fallen for this idea that you could just be going along your life, you're 25, life is great, and you just get this onslaught of memories of this horrible thing you did 5 years ago that you suppressed. I think that's such like a movie thing, and it's just not a real way that the brain works. Yes, sometimes the brain does defend us and kind of disassociate from certain experiences and memories, and some of our memories are foggy because our brain is protecting us from like a PTSD trauma situation. But that's not what I see with clients. So I always tell people there's certain ways that something is OCD. Is it urgent? Is it loud? Is it constant? Did it kind of come out of nowhere? Nothing really brought it on. It just came out of nowhere. Is it repetitive? Is it against our values or something we're not? Because here's the situation, Ro. I don't know you personally, but I do know the OCD community. And no client I've ever had I've worked in the OCD field since '09. Nobody I've ever had has been this bad, evil person that's harmed people and are finally remembering it and coming to me to kind of confess. OCD convinces you that you're this kind of bad, immoral person, and it tries to get you to go away from who you are. You know who you are. You know you're not somebody who's done this horrible, immoral thing and you deserve like lifelong punishment. I mean, I don't know you, but I'm going to assume that because I've never had a client come into my office and has really been this horrible person. So what OCD is trying to do is it's trying to bring up a what if scenario. It's trying to get you to treat it like it's real, and it's trying to get you to like plummet through your memories. But the more you try to go through your memories, it's like making a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. They're going to blur. It's going to be harder to access. And then OCD is going to fill in the blanks, and you're going to start to be convinced you've done something horrid. So what we want to do is we want to say, look, this isn't urgent. Up until this thought popped up, I wasn't even thinking about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shelf it. I'm not going to try to figure it out. I'm going to feel like I'm a bad person or irresponsible or guilty because I'm not, addressing it ASAP, but I have no information to address. There's nothing in front of me that I can access to address it. It didn't come up to me right away. So now the OCD wants me to jump in from that O to that C, take over and do this work. And I'm not going to do it. Just going to shelf it. I'm going to spend maybe 3 days, 4 days, just kind of leaving it alone. Let your kind of mind state get back to normal, get out of that anxious place. Don't fish for answers. OCD uses confirmation bias. It wants you to fish for like scenarios so that you can build this story, this OCD story of how you've done this horrible thing. Don't do OCD's job for it. It's like, you know what, OCD, you gave me a quick obsession. I'm not going to do anything with it for a couple of days. I'm just going to shelf it. I may not feel great about that, but I'm going to let facts kind of rise to the surface and see what happens. I might have done this thing. I might have not done this thing. I don't know, but it's not worth my time. I'm not going to address this. Typically what happens is when people leave it, the anxiety subsides and then they get the clarity they want. So that's how you know it's an intrusive thought. It's rigid, it's horrific, it's always catastrophic. It's never like you accidentally like stole a candy bar from a 7-Eleven. It's always this horrible thing. You've never done something like this previously or currently. So if it's urgent, if it's overestimation of consequence, catastrophic, constant, all of that, if it's part of the theme that you have, if it's trying to convince you or something you're not, I mean, those are ways that you know. So definitely make sure that you are not doing the work for it. Somebody, unfortunately, always kind of does the compulsions for it and then builds a story. So you want to make sure that you don't do that. Somebody says, I can only afford about 5 sessions with an OCD specialist. This was pre-submitted. What should be the main thing I focus on and try to get out of those sessions? So what I would really say is prior to that first session, I would suggest that you actually do some education on OCD before you go to treatment. I mean, a therapist can give you really good education on OCD, and I always recommend if somebody can go to multiple sessions that they would do that in session. But if you can't, at least access live streams like this. There's a lot of good books. If you go to the IOCDF's website, there's a whole place that has books. I would go to those. I would educate myself on at least what OCD is. That way, when you go in, since you only have 5 sessions, you can let the clinician know I've done a lot of research. I understand the way that a basic understanding of the way the brain works, how obsessions come about, how I'm tricked into then doing the compulsion, reinforcing that cycle, like knowing the basics, right? And then what I would do, if you can do it on your own, there's some workbooks that will allow you to kind of create your own hierarchy. So really writing down like what are the external things that trigger me? Those are people, places, objects, events. What are some of my main kind of core fears? And then what are the compulsions that I either do or don't do because of OCD? So kind of coming in with that hierarchy and ranking it. What I would spend the next 5 sessions doing is really having the clinician explain the treatment, because that's not as easy to learn. That's something that we've been trained and trained and trained on. So that clinician can sit down with you, go through your hierarchy. You can do a few exposures in session and you can really learn the treatment. That's what I would spend the 5 sessions doing for sure. All right, we have another question that is virtual, live at 12:29 Fran, your time. It says, as someone who has been a sufferer of OCD since 42 now, I get stuck on addictive things. I tend to want to drink that drink or give in to alcohol when it's only a quick fix of anxiety. Any suggests on how to overcome needing that drink or pushing that obsession away? One thing that I hear from a lot of people, and I'm glad because I did this and I was like, is it just me? A lot of us do, because of the OCD, do have kind of addictive personalities. I know for me, one thing that I struggled with and I still kind of have to tackle at times and be cautious about is overeating. And it's not because I have an overeating problem or an eating disorder in that sense. It's like when I see a plate of food, my brain is like, you got to eat everything on the plate. You got to eat it, even if you're stuffed. Because if you start something, you got to finish. OCD likes to finish what it starts. I have a lot of clients that talk about like gambling tendencies, shopping tendencies. So some of these more kind of addictive things. I had I went to an in-person lecture once, and it was with a neuroscientist, and I was talking to him about OCD, and he said individuals with OCD tend to have higher levels of dopamine and lower levels of serotonin, similar to what we see in addicts. So he wasn't surprised that people with OCD sometimes have addictive like behavior. Now, if it's something around alcohol, let's say it's not a problem. If it was more of like a problem, obviously I would suggest to talk to a clinician that focuses on substance use disorders, whether going to AA, anything like sobriety. But for some people like Chris, I'm not addicted to drinking. I'm not addicted to something. It's just like I see something and I have to do it. I think of a song, I have to listen to it. If it's more so like that, what we want to practice on is delaying that gratification. So for me, what helped me is like I put half of my meal in a to-go box and kind of wrap it up to take it home. And I eat only what's on the plate. And then right after, my brain is like, you have more food, you have more food, eat it, eat it, eat it, eat it. No, I'm taking it home and I'll have it for dinner. So I delay. Once I kind of leave the restaurant, get in my car, I stop thinking about the food. The same with clients. If they don't listen to the song right away, they say the song is not going to be listened to. Sometimes you need to delay. You're not at the point you can just eliminate. So you might say, okay, I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes. I'll drink that drink, or I'll listen to that song, or whatever it may be. A lot of times that obsessional component sort of fades, and then we're able to be more clear. But I do want to one last time reiterate, if this is more about alcohol and it's a problem, please get help. I'm sober myself. I've been sober for a long time. What I'm talking about with food and other things, alcohol was actually a problem. I luckily never like ruined my life because of it or anything, but I was using alcohol to cope. It is a quick fix. I was using it to kind of not have intrusive thoughts, to calm myself down. And what I realized is the OCD was so reliant on it. I mean, I was so reliant on it to get rid of the OCD that it became a problem. So for me, I'm just to be safe. I'm sober. I don't really like alcohol anyways. But yeah, so you want to kind of, I would say maybe work with a clinician to find out exactly what's going on there. That would be good for sure. All right, let's go to another pre-submitted question. The question is, my OCD event example, when I say to myself, I will do this work, my mind tells me that I will not let you do that. It will make you a loser. What can I do to prevent it? Always remember, OCD lies. I mean, I know I'm going to say that a million times on any stream that I do, but OCD is never going to tell you something that's accurate or that's helpful. So let's say you're going to do your work and OCD says, don't do that work. It's going to make you dumb. It'll make you a loser, whatever it's threatening you with. That's kind of like our choice there. That's where our choice pops in. Am I going to listen to OCD and do what it says, which then unfortunately reinforces it? And pretty soon you start to have a pattern of that and you're not getting your work done. You have to drop school, or if you're talking about, work, your boss is writing you up, etc. Or do I kind of defy OCD? Somebody asked earlier about naming OCD. And I really do think that that's why we do that, is because it's like, look, I don't like this guy who comes into my life every time I try to get work done and tells me that this is something that, will make me dumb or will make me stupid. You hear us talk a lot about values work. It comes from acceptance commitment therapy, the C. It's like a commitment to live based on like values, goals, things that we want to do versus fear. Here's a great opportunity to flex that muscle. So in this case, we ask ourselves, do I want to go ahead and listen to the OCD, be safe, and not take a risk and not do my work, and then feel good like, ooh, dodged a bullet. Now I won't become a loser. If somebody does that, OCD doesn't stop there. Pretty soon it's this work assignment, this school assignment, then it becomes this thing, that thing, grows until now it's a way of life. And that's when OCD starts to get us to isolate and give up things and stuff like that. So we don't want to make sure that we listen to that. It's one of those things that we decide that this is not something that I'm going to choose to engage with anymore. OCD can only make a suggestion and I get to choose how I respond. So I'm going to choose to commit to doing my work. I will accept the fact that I'll have thoughts. OCD will not be happy that I'm not listening to it, but I'm going to get my work done. When you push through and get your work done, make sure that you're not actively engaging in mental compulsions. Focus your energy outward on your work and focus on getting that done and take the risk. OCD, once again, is confirmation bias, right? It comes up with all these what if questions. It kind of uses our like worst case scenarios that our head makes up to kind of bring back and say, oh, this is bad, right? Go ahead and give it an experiment. Try it out. Do the work and see what happens. Do you become this loser overnight? Does everything change? Is your life ruined? Or does nothing happen and then you've learned OCD's lied again? Felice Baker asked a question at 12:31. I would love to see the IOCDF work with psych hospitals, especially acute, on how to treat OCD. There are not enough OCD hospitals. Would this be something the IOCD would possibly do in the future? So first of all, to answer your question is yes, there needs to be definitely more hospitals specifically focused on OCD, as well as residentials. We have a couple great residentials in the United States. Liz isn't here, but she runs one of them in Houston. But there's not enough, and there's not enough hospitals that understand OCD. And in fact, a lot of hospitals, there was an article, I'm part of a therapist group, and there was an article somebody passed around, and it was where somebody with OCD had been put through psych hospital until finally one of the clinicians recognized OCD and said, she's not crazy, she has OCD, and ended up getting the proper care. Unfortunately, about 60%, the majority, like 2/3 of people, go to a hospital or a general doctor as their front line for OCD treatment. And a lot of times they're not trained, they're uneducated on OCD, and they don't know what to do. And they actually make the situation worse. They put them on the wrong kind of medication, et cetera. So one of the things that the IOCDF I know is really focusing on right now is anxiety in the classroom. So trying to do the same, but in the classroom, so teachers can identify anxiety and OCD, can make sure to refer them and get proper care. I know that as a member of OCD Southern California, I've done that a lot. I've gone to hospitals, I've gone to treatment centers, I've gotten to counseling centers and educated them on OCD so that if they do have somebody with OCD come through, they can be properly treated. I know other individuals, whether it's an affiliate, an advocate, or a member of the IOCDF, are doing that consistently. So is it a grand scale thing happening? No, we don't have the resources. So that's why, whenever I know Giving Tuesday is coming up. So that's why when the IOCDF asks for donations, it's not to be greedy. The foundation works on a very kind of like skeleton team. I think people always think the IOCDF is 100 staff members. I think it's still only around 15 who do excellent work. But one of the things that donations can help is programs like that. We're really able to use money to get into the schools. Getting into hospitals would be great as well. And I always tell people that volunteers and advocates and people donating their time is great because it allows us to go in and do things like that. But we have meetings every Tuesday, and I always bring some of the topics that came up. But this is something I think is really good to bring up. So I'll bring it up to IOCDF staff because I think it is good to not only do schools, but maybe hospitals as well and educate. That sounds really good. All right, the next live question is at 12:34. It's from Sarah Stein. If someone with OCD has experienced tics before, are some OCD medications better for them than others? What I'm going to do, Sarah, I'm not completely negating your question. I'm going to ask if Fran can actually copy it and put it on our question sheet. We actually just had a meeting yesterday about live programming, and both Research Roundtable and us asked, we're going to do a lunch and learn or an Ask the Experts, and we're going to have on either one or two psychiatrists. So any question, we actually have a bunch of medication-based questions. We're going to bring someone on soon. We'll see if we can get someone before the holidays because we have to ask guests. Liz and I are committed, right? But we have to ask guests to come on, and some of them may be traveling in the holidays. But we're definitely going to do a couple different panels with psychiatrists. So my knowledge on this question is going to pale in comparison to somebody like that. So please, please, please check in with us, Sarah. We'll definitely promote it on IOCDF social media because we want to make sure that you know that it is definitely something that we're going to do soon. It's not pushed back. We literally just had a meeting about it yesterday, so we'll get some psychiatrists on. Odd Vision at 12:37 says, "Hi, Chris. Greetings from Greece. I had to read this question because I'm half Greek. I'm so excited. I always am nerded out with Greeks and Norwegians because I'm half Greek and half Norwegian. And I'm super excited. My mom's maiden name is Kalomiris, and we own a Greek restaurant down in San Diego. Not me, but my extended family. And I'm going to Greece next fall. And I love Greek people, so I just wanted to read this. But thank you so much for your kind words. It really means a lot to me. And shout out from Greece. That's really, really awesome. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This question is a pre-submitted question. It's a little bit long, so I'm going to read it, and maybe Fran could just put a little bit up. But it says, real about OCD. If one has this type of OCD and it involves the shame and guilt of having done things in the past that they regret, that they've hurt others, not physically, but emotionally, and is living with uncertainty of whether or not one will always have this feeling of shame, guilt, and that they continuously need to confess, is that the goal? I know uncertainty is the goal when it comes to any type of OCD, but to forever live feeling horrible about yourself despite being forgiven by those that hurt you is daunting. So to sum up the question, if you have real event OCD and you're ruminating about a past event that you did and you hurt some people emotionally and they've forgiven you, but you're finding yourself just sitting with like guilt and shame and the need to confess, is living with that uncertainty the goal? Liz and I talked about this at a conference presentation, and if you went to the online conference or didn't, I think you can still register. And it's one of the very first talks on Friday at 8 a.m. We talked about, do you have to accept the worst case scenario? When we're asking you to accept uncertainty, we're not saying, I'm this horrible person who did this bad thing, and I have guilt and shame, and I need to confess forever. That's my life. That's not what living with uncertainty is asking for. You've done everything you can do. You've gone to the people that you've hurt. You've apologized. They forgive you. If you didn't have OCD, you would have moved on by now. But because OCD has us just kind of ruminate, and remember, ruminate is like chewing up food, spitting it out, and eating it again and chewing it up. It's just sitting with that same thought, that same feeling over and over and over again. So somebody without OCD would have moved on. But With you, you're actively in a compulsion cycle. You're kind of like focusing on the guilt, focusing on the shame, wanting to confess. You're still keeping it alive. Your job is to drop it, shut down the case, put it in the cold case files, shut it down and say, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. This guilt and the shame, I've lived through it. I've apologized. I'm done. There's nothing left for me to do. It is done. Everything I'm doing now is the OCD. Nobody else would be doing this. And I'm doing compulsions. I'm dropping the compulsions. That's the key to getting better from OCD. Now, I still feel crummy and I feel worse because I'm not doing the compulsion. So now I feel like I'm saying that I'm fine with that. But when we say living with uncertainty, what we're saying is that you're never going to feel complete unless you do compulsions for the end of your life, and that will never make you complete. So what we're asking you to do here is to abandon this, walk away, no longer confess. You're going to be guilty, you're going to be shamed, fine. Those feelings will fade. Feelings are temporary. The uncertainty is, I don't want to try to figure this out anymore. I don't want to try to get an answer. I could feel this way forever. I could feel this way for 2 weeks, for 2 minutes, never again. I don't know, but it is not worth my time. It's not worth my energy. I've done everything I can really do, which is apologize, and I'm done. One event doesn't define me. I don't need to spend any more time on it. I'm done. It feels uncertain because I'm defying OCD and not answering it. And I'm so used to not doing that. But I'm walking away and I'm sorry. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. That's what uncertainty is. It's definitely not, I have to be miserable forever. Leonora at 1241 asks, what's the main difference in treatment between scrupulosity and contamination OCD? One of the good things that you want to recognize is that with OCD, it absolutely doesn't always really matter the subtype per se. In the beginning, it does matter because you want to create a treatment plan specifically for those. But once you kind of start to recognize the way that OCD works and the mechanics under the engine, you'll start to notice that really the treatment is about recognizing how you're actively kind of adding to the compulsions, figure out what your obsession is, where the seed pops in, and what you're doing compulsively to kind of keep the contamination or the scrupulosity around, doing opposite action, making sure that you're not sitting there arguing in your head. You're just tolerating what OCD is saying and you're recognizing that you don't even have to answer it anymore. Response prevention and being consistent with treatment. Now, with scrupulosity, something that I do as a clinician that may be slightly different than contamination is, and Katie O'Dunn talks about it a lot. I may need to talk to somebody's religious figure. They may not feel ready for treatment because they feel like the treatment's going to ask them to go against God. However, I educate them that the treatment is not trying to be blasphemous and make God angry. If you're praying for 30 minutes a day in the morning, 30 in the afternoon, 30 at night, yet your church norm is really like a 5-minute prayer in the morning and 5 at night, the goal is to get you to do what other individuals in your church do, not to defy God. So sometimes with scrupulosity, it is kind of getting them on board, getting their religious figures on board, and kind of weaving out like what is compulsions and OCD and what's not. Contamination, you might not have to do that, but sometimes I have to educate clients that they can't get HIV or AIDS just from touching a doorknob because they just didn't have the education. But as a clinician, if I have a client at 2 with scrupulosity and then at 3 with contamination, it doesn't feel a lot different. It's more of the buy-in. And so the client with scrupulosity needs to really trust the clinician that they're not trying to get them to defy God and go against God, that they're really, really just trying to get them to actually get closer with their religion and further away from OCD. Dawn at 1250 asks, I'm having a hard time with OCD and health anxiety. I almost lost my daughters to medical mistakes. My husband has a cancer scare. I've tried ketamine and TMS and some ERP with no luck. What I would say is that it sounds, I don't know if you tried medication. I would try medication before ketamine and TMS. However, TMS and ketamine can be helpful. So I'd work with a psychiatrist that definitely understands this disorder and make sure that we start there. When you talk about some ERP, what I always ask clients to do is to really find a specialist in your area. And the idea of treatment is not to be fear factor. What it is in this case is that there are real health scares. Health and having health anxiety, this is something that is accurate. This was one of my subtypes. I had family members with heart issues and with hearing loss and things like that. The difference is what we want to make sure we do is we wait until symptoms arise. We go to a doctor, they give us advice, and we don't do too much or too little. We really follow the doctor's directions. individuals with OCD and health anxiety are constantly checking their body for things. They're constantly like checking their senses. Do I feel something in my throat? Am I hearing ringing in my ears? Am I smelling something funny? Like, is my heart beating too fast? Like, they kind of like scan. So the treatment would to be to stop scanning. It would be to stop researching things online. And it would be to say, look, if I start to show signs or pains or anything like that, I'll make sure that I go and find someone. And I might get a second opinion and I might do a little bit research on background, but I don't want to do too much. So it's really not about abandoning taking care of your health, Dawn. It's more so finding a balance so that you're not doing too much. So for me, because this was one of my major subtypes, cancer was a big fear of mine. I stopped searching for cancer and I was like, I'm going to trust that at my normal checkups, they'll search for stuff. When my doctor gave me instructions, I didn't do less or more. I did what they asked. When I went to doctor's appointments, I didn't lead them to a certain answer. I allowed them to do their job. So what I would try is working with a psychiatrist on meds. If you already tried meds and those don't work, ketamine and TMS didn't work, I would talk to a specialist about other options. And then what I would say is really find a treatment provider that understands what you're going through, because there is real life experiences that OC is kind of using to scare you into making sure that you don't do ERP or you don't kind of drop the compulsions, because it really wants to say, see these things. But just like in real life, if I see somebody win the lottery, I don't suddenly think I'm rich. This situation doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go through the same thing. So hopefully that was helpful, Dawn. But really, really, like I said, find someone and explain to them, I have health scares. I need to just get to the middle. I need to get to a point in my life that I can take care of my wellness without it being compulsive. And I don't want to completely abandon my health. And that's what I would do as a clinician. All right, so I see that I have more questions. I just recognized the time. I have my screen big, so I didn't see the time, but I just did. So we're at time. So what I'm going to make sure, Michael Williams and on, any question after you that I didn't get to, we have a sheet of pre-submitted questions. I'm going to add it to that. Those were some of the questions that I read. They were either pre-submitted or they were questions we didn't get to last live stream. So the good news is come back next week, Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, or East Coast time, it's 12 noon. I don't know that date off the top of my head. Maybe it's the 30th. Yeah. So Wednesday, November 30th, we'll be back, Liz and I. So we'll get to the questions we didn't get to today, and we'll answer new live questions and any pre-submitted. If you go to iocdf.org/peace of mind, there's a place that you can pre-submit questions. So make sure you submit them there. Or like I said, we'll take some of these questions we didn't get to and answer them next week. As always, thank you so much, you all, for coming out. This is only because of you, by you coming to our live streams, asking questions and engaging. That's why we have these live streams. We love to be there and support. There's a lot of really good live streams coming up. Make sure you check your emails from IOCDF or go to iocdf.org/peace of mind. We're having a holiday party. That is Monday. I think it's Monday, December 19th. I should really have these dates memorized, but that's going to be a Zoom link, and you can come on and hang out with all of us advocates, including Liz, myself, Ethan, Katie, Tom, Valerie, and all of them. So it's going to be kind of like a live event. We're also going to do a couple holiday live streams, and we'll be doing live streams throughout the holiday. So please come back. Liz and I are here every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 Eastern, except the second Wednesday where Dr. Abramowitz and Kyle step in and do Research Roundtable. Once again, thank you for your questions. If we didn't get to them, we'll put them on that sheet. Come back next week, we'll answer them. And just kind of like a final thought today, remind yourself that who you are at the core is a good person, and you know that. The OCD cons us into doing all kinds of compulsions that we'd never do without the disorder. Don't lose sight of who you are. You're an incredible human being, and don't let OCD ever, ever, ever challenge that. Thank you so much. Make sure to go to iocdf.org for all the different information that you have. And come back to the live streams. We also have live streams Tuesday evenings. So if you want to know the schedule, go to iocdf.org/peace of mind. If you missed some of this, go to youtube.com/iocdf to watch anything that you missed. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. And if you celebrate Thanksgiving, eat so much good food. Enjoy it. I'm Greek. We do Greek food. So shout out to everybody from Greece, and Val will take you with me. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.